On this episode of Purposely Curious, we discuss one of the human body's greatest mistakes, the CCR5 Delta 32 genetic mutation. This genetic mutation essentially renders certain people immune to some of the worst diseases in human history. Join us as we delve into this intriguing scientific subject. Grab your lab coats and let's get nice and cozy as this episode starts now. Hello, Leonie. How are you?
Greetings, Mary. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's hot and humid, and I'm not about this life, guys.
Where are you? Florida?
Oh, it feels like I am. It's horrible. Today is August 22nd, and I think it was in the 90s where I live, but because it's so humid, it feels a lot hotter.
Yeah, 90s where you live is way too hot. And because you're like almost coastal, pretty much. So it's one of those things where it's just going to be humid. It's a little humid here where I am, but not too bad, but I think it's worse where you are,
Yeah, it's pretty bad. We are recording on Saturday. It's 10:37 at night. And as discussed in a previous episode, I do not have centralized air. So I feel muggy and I am sweating. And obviously because we are recording, I can't have, for sound purposes, I can't have like the window of the room I'm in open. So this is definitely, I think, the worst one of the days where I feel really hot. And we're doing it at 10:30 at night, guys. Right. That's how hot I feel. Like I'm sweating. My face, it looks super shiny, super like oily. And it's because it's that humid. So yeah, anyways. And you, how are you doing in your centralized air apartment?
I'm super comfortable. I'm sitting here relaxing in a nice chair and talking to you. And I'm like, wow, it feels pretty good out right now.
Yeah, I hate them. Seriously. And it's crazy because, when we record, we're never together. So I really am like, it's like night and day right now between our temperatures at your place versus mine, right?
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's hot over here, and it's humid a little outside, but I'm definitely indoors and, I'm lucky to have, central AC and all that. So it helps me with my life whenever I have to do stuff like this. Cause I'd be dying if I had nothing right now, I'd be dying. Like, I would go outside, jump in the pool, and probably drown because, I can't swim. But at least I'll be cool, right?
You can't swim?
No.
Ooh. You're not alone. I have my best friends, Christina and Claudia, that cannot either. So you're not alone.
Yeah. It's a whole other podcast episode topic. But, yeah, I used to know how, and then something traumatic happened in the water, and then I'm like, nope, I'm done. I'm out.
Oh, so you can swim. You just choose not to.
I used to, yeah. But we're talking like, I was 10 years old, so it was enough that scarred me, what I'm saying? And I'm like, I'm done. So every time I watch these really cool water movies, I just get freaked out. Like internally, like I'll be sitting there with a smile internally. I'm like, that's fucked up. Like that scares me,
Yeah.
So...
Totally get it. I can share with you, I had a similar experience. I am able to swim. I'm not necessarily your like strongest swimmer. But I don't know if I was in the ocean or in a lake. I was a teenager and I was in the deep waters and I was swimming and I got a really bad leg cramp.
Oh, no.
And I panicked and at that point panic set in because if anyone has gotten those, they hurt like a bitch.
Yeah.
And I'm, deep in the water and I panicked and so I couldn't touch the ground and it was like full on panic. I would probably handle it different now because I've taken classes on how to like relax because I'm a worrier, right?
Right.
But ever since then, I'm not comfortable swimming in the ocean. I have since, but I'm nervous up to it. In the pools, I have no problem. I just feel safer. I don't know why. And so I get where you're coming from.
Right.
Yeah. So that was a scary memory I have. But
Yeah.
stupid cramps, leg cramps. So as you guys heard, and Leonie, I'm sure you probably listened to my episode with my friends last week on WAP.
Oh my God. Wet ass pupusas. I love it. That extra salsa. Dude, I love it dripping, man. It's tasty as fuck. Seriously, that was a great episode.
Yeah.
I had a good time. I laughed my ass off.
Oh, well, that's what I keep hearing. I was like, people are like, wow, we really thought it was hilarious. And it's been getting solid downloads. So just me and my friends hanging out. You know, I had the random idea because we would hang out and we would always we just randomly start talking about random stuff, right?
Right.
We might have had a few drinks and,
Might have, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
guaranteed.
we get into really deep conversation. So it was my friend Jerry's birthday. So I literally was like, I'm going to take my podcast gear. It's only like 5 of us or 6 of us. Yeah. So I was like, we got microphones. Come on.
There was one thing you guys did not bring up, and I was a little disappointed. I gotta admit, little disappointed. Okay, I was like, one of these dudes has to mention this band, and no one did it. And I'm like, come on, guys, I get it, Chris Brown, whatever, but come on, guys, there was somebody who did it way before this. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
You ever heard of True Life Crew?
No.
Oh my God.
Mary. Did you like my impersonation of you?
Mary. It's about spot on right there, eh? That's the best impersonation of me ever. Right there. Seriously, you're going to have to go download True Life Crew. They were doing the nasty fucking lyric shit before anybody. And some of those songs were on the radio, but they edit out the bad words, But they're still talking about sex and bending over girls and you know what I'm saying? And men do this. I mean, I was a kid. I was a young kid, and this shit was on the radio in the 80s. Like Power 106 used to play this shit, And, but yeah, I'm surprised none of your friends mentioned it. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, that's crazy. Because that was the first, hypersexual, content you would ever, I don't remember the name of the record. It might have been called Nasty as They Wanna Be or something like that. I don't know. But
yeah,
check it out.
I will. Yeah, I had never heard of them before, so I'll take a listen, and then I'll get back to you.
You're gonna be pissed off. You're gonna be like, "Why are you listening to this shit?"
Right?
And I'll be like, "Hey, I didn't write it. That shit was just out, on the radio in the 80s."
Yeah, yeah.
It's definitely rap, whatever. It's on, but it's just crazy shit,
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe we can do an episode where we actually recite songs that we thought were romantic. And now with new adult ears, we're realizing it's kinky. Because there's a lot out there.
Man.
And you can go back to the 70s. Let's do it.
I'll go back to the 1950s.
Yeah, let's do it.
One of my friends, I'm gonna tell you just quickly. One of my friends, he's still alive. He's the original drummer for Little Richard. So he invented the rock and roll drumming back in the 50s. And he told me the meaning of one of his songs, and my fucking jaw dropped when he told me what it was about. And I'm like, "This is the 1950s. Are you kidding me?" And he's like, "Nope, that's what the song's about." I'll leave you on that cliffhanger. So sometimes we'll discuss it.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. I think that's going to be a fun one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going to this week's episode, I wanted to talk about a genetic mutation. That basically the reason I thought about it is because you guys know we're all dealing with COVID-19. And I'm not going to go into COVID-19. So hear me out, guys. They were discussing the fact that COVID-19 attacks the cells, right? Our immune cells a certain way, the same way HIV does. And I heard this a few times, and me being a nerd and a dork it took a few times for me to hear this to actually be like, wait a minute. I wrote a paper in nursing school I think it was my chemistry or was it biology? about a genetic mutation that impeded entrance to the cell, right?
Right.
To these cells that this virus infects.
Right.
And so I was like, I wonder if people who have this genetic mutation could be partially or fully immune to COVID. And so I thought it would be nice to do an episode discussing, again, not in relationship to COVID. We're going to talk about what this genetic mutation is, right?
Right.
We're going to talk about the Black Plague. We're going to talk about HIV, and we'll touch on smallpox. But in general, I thought when I found out about this fucking 15 years ago, I was in awe, right? It's definitely from when I found out about it, there's a lot of changes that have transpired since then.
Right.
But I thought to me, this is interesting as fuck. And I'm sure there are people out there that are going to think, you know what? The bitch is right. This is interesting as fuck.
The lady is right.
No. Don't censor me, Leonie. Okay? We're in the era of the WAP. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, bring on the pupusas, man.
Oh, God. Everyone's like, what is up with her over there?
If they're dripping wet and red, even better.
I love pupusas. Yeah. So, have you heard, Leonie, of the CCR5 Delta 32 mutation?
Yes. Yeah, I have, and it's a really interesting one. It was talked about in my courses in biochemistry, and it's something that, obviously we have to visit it for, obviously course material and exams and all that, but it's a long time ago. It was a while ago, and it's something really interesting because it keeps popping up. Like you said, there might be a connection to COVID, right? But
yeah.
the one of the first connections that was made was HIV, so it's definitely
Actually, no, it was the Black Plague.
No, I'm sorry. In terms of using the knowledge of how it works to focus on how to
possibly treat.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I was like, well, actually, no.
Yeah. No. It goes back. Yeah, it goes way back. I know, thousands of years.
Yes. So to kind of, for those of you who may not have a science background or not interested or not know very much of the human body, as you guys know, we just to talk about chromosomes, right? We have a set amount of chromosomes that make us a certain way, but if there's like one deviation or one mutation or something different, that could change the way we're born, for example.
Right.
And so someone who has, for example, Down syndromes, they're missing a chromosome. And so those little mutations that our bodies have can be a good thing or a detrimental thing, right? In this case, what we're going to talk about, it was a good thing that people somehow stumbled upon, scientists stumbled upon. And now it's pretty much well known in the science medical world, but they're still trying to learn more about it, right? So I guess we can talk about what CCR5 is. It's basically we have our cells. Is it white blood cells or let's see.
Yeah, the leukocytes, they're white blood cells.
Okay. So basically if we're thinking of, you guys are looking at a cell, right? The CCR5 is kind of like a little thing that comes out of the cell. That basically, what could we call it? I want to make it as simple as possible, if that makes sense. So we have a circular cell, right? These little prongs are coming out of it. And so those prongs are CCR5, right? And that's what the virus is attached to, and then it pulls it into the cell.
Right.
And that's how the virus infects your body. So what the genetic mutation that we have, they call that genetic mutation Delta 32. What happens with the mutation is that it's the CCR5s are defective, so they can't come out of the cell. So when the virus comes into your body, it can't infect you because it's not able to penetrate the cells.
Right.
Because the CCR5s, the genetic mutation in your body, does not allow the CCR5s, which are like those prongs that come out, right, of the cell,
Right.
to come out, so the virus can't attach to them and then be pulled into the cell.
Right.
And so that is what that mutation is. And so we're going to talk about how it came known to people. But there's a lot of science and a lot of things that maybe Leone can mention, because as you guys know, Leone's a science lab guy. So he might be able to say certain things that I don't know. But the way I found out about CCR5 Delta 32 was I've mentioned in several episodes that I'm a nerd for documentaries. So this might have been like 15 years ago, probably more. I was watching Secrets of the Dead on PBS. Have you heard of that show?
I have, but I've never watched it though.
Yeah, it's so old. But it was one of those shows that I myself really enjoyed.
Nice.
And in one of these episodes, they were talking about the Black Plague. As you guys know, the Black Plague was one of the biggest pandemics the world has ever seen. Do you know much about the plague?
I don't know too much about it, but I know that it killed. It was predominantly in Europe, I believe, and possibly Middle East, and it killed a lot of people. I don't recall it. I believe it was a hemorrhagic fever plague, right? Wasn't it?
So the Black Plague, basically, you would get fever, boils. Your skin would just get boils everywhere.
Right.
And so they called it the bubonic plague.
Yes.
And it's a bacteria that attacks the cells the same way what we talked about earlier, how it enters the cells, the bodies. But if it got into your lungs, so you would get the, pneumonic plague. So people would be, once you contracted it, you'd be dead in 40 days.
Yep.
They estimate that it was 75 to 200 million people died between 1347 and 1351. So they believe 25 to 30% of Europeans died from it.
Yeah.
Now, there were survivors. People did survive it. Some people contracted it, survived it, right?
Yep.
Then there were people who were, never got it. Now, why is that important, right? Back then, we don't have surgical masks like we do now.
Right.
You guys know the Black Death, that mask people wear now to joke around about the plague.
The pointy ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the extent of their mask back then, right?
Right.
But that only came around. So what they noticed is that when people would get sick, it spread really quickly and you were dead in 40 days. No ifs or buts. But scientists were trying to be like, so why did some people get it and survive, right? And why did some people, literally there was a woman in the documentary who her entire family died of it. And she cared for all of them.
Yeah.
And she never once got it. And so scientists, people are looking into this like, there must be something to it. So what they did is they went to the archives, National Archives, and started looking up these names, right? To try to see if they can find people that were living now, I guess, descendants.
Right.
But at the time, there were towns. Now think of, this is the 1300s, right? Think of everyone. We didn't have the big cities that we have now, right? Entire towns were wiped out.
Right.
Entire towns died of it. And so this scientist was trying to see, well, why did some people survive it? And God bless him, because that's the reason we found this genetic mutation.
Right.
They found some descendants that were, it's been hundreds and hundreds of years. They noticed that they all had a genetic thing in common, which was a mutation, which is that mutation that we talked about. Some people had one copy of it, and some people had two copies of it.
Right.
And so they believe that maybe the people who had one copy of it got the bubonic plague but survived it, and those who had two copies of it were not infected, which would be like this lady who her entire family died and she cared for every single one of them. And this is a disease that's from it comes from fleas, right? I think literally I just read like 2 weeks ago there's one in Tahoe.
Yep, there's a case 5 days ago in Lake Tahoe here in California.
Yeah. So we in the United States get about 5 cases a year, something like that. So it's not like eradicated. It happens in the world, but I don't know if people are kind of freaked out about COVID that now it's like, oh my God, I'm not worried about it is what I'm saying.
Right.
But so basically this, even though this is not a virus, the bubonic plague is a bacteria, it enters the cells in the same way, right?
Yep.
So at that point, right, this guy was like, holy shit, could these people, right? So he found the descendants of all these survivors. So he literally went and said, okay, these people survived, these people survived, these people survived, and tracked a big percentage of their descendants, and they all had the genetic mutation. So again, this is not proven, it's his theory, right? They estimate that there are that the likelihood, most of them are Europeans, because they have not found this genetic mutation in people from Africa or Asia. It's usually just in Europeans. So they estimate that 1 in 20,000 Europeans may have, or is it 1 in 10 now?
What's 1 in 10?
Yeah, that they may have this genetic mutation.
Right.
But fast forward to the 80s. What was happening in the 80s as far as diseases?
A whole hell of a lot of unprotected sex, which at the time was blamed on, homosexual sex, right? It was a homosexual disease in the early 80s, and people were scared because they didn't know the mode of transmission. They didn't know if it was like, are we going to catch it because if you get a cold, so precautions were taken, and it took a while. It took, I think, a couple of years of research to figure out that, hey, it's transmitted through, blood, semen, or shared needles. Basically it's a bloodborne pathogen, that you can catch from somebody else, through exposure of body fluids, but that took a while to figure out, it was a scary time. I mean, I was way too young, and to understand any of that, obviously, and even the adults didn't understand it. Even scientists didn't understand it,
Correct. Yeah.
But it was scary for those, because, we didn't know how HIV was being transmitted,
Yeah. Yeah. And so what they learned, now you guys know Mr. Fauci.
Yes.
Am I saying it right? Mr. Fauci?
Yep. He was one of the leaders in that.
Yeah. So he was one of the men or scientists, doctors, who was in the forefront of the HIV epidemic in the 80s. So there was a man, right? We're in the midst of it, right? Where the HIV epidemic is happening. And I guess because of this man, they're learning how does, like you said, it's bloodborne, but it enters the cell in the same way that the bubonic plague enters the cell,
right? Which
is those prongs that are coming out. The prongs are the CCR5, right? That are coming out.
Yeah, we call them receptors, by the way, receptors.
Yeah, I'm gonna call them prongs. For people that aren't
right.
For people that aren't too savvy on it.
Right.
I like the way it sounds.
Prongs.
So, now this is a virus. The bubonic plague is bacteria, but they enter the body, they enter the cell in the same way.
Right.
They realized that there was a gay man who, again, we didn't know at the time. Nobody knew what was happening. People were learning. They saw that it was infectious this way. Everyone was learning. And he had his partner contracted HIV and essentially died of AIDS, and everyone he knew who had gotten it died from it. And he was sure enough, he was like, I'm gonna get it, like I have it, because my partner died, you know what I mean, like
right.
it's gonna happen. he kept getting tested and tested, and he kept coming up negative. And he was like, this doesn't make sense. Like, he was like, I have it. I fucking have it. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
my husband, well, they weren't married, but, you
Yeah.
know, he was essentially, my husband has it. I fucking have it. He had talked to a doctor who then was like, could there be a like, there's something that triggered him that was like, maybe there's something that makes him not get it, right? He called a friend who is a scientist. Have you heard any of this?
Yeah. Was this part of the Berlin patient and the two men from Europe?
I don't know where they're from, but it might be.
Yeah.
I just don't know that end of it.
Okay.
Where he got in contact with his friend, right? And he
Yes.
said, look, we have someone here who should have HIV and doesn't. We've tested him a million times and he's always negative.
Right.
His partner died, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so they took his blood sample. They did studies, right? They did where they would run a genetic profile of it, you know, and so this team did that end of it. And then the other team on a petri dish kept infecting it with HIV over and over, and it would never come out positive. And so he had the CCR5 Delta 32 mutation.
Which means he's negative, right?
Yeah, well, he's always been negative, and that's
Right.
how they referred him to the scientists.
Right.
So what they figured out is essentially this is potentially why he can never get infected, because he has the mutation, right? Those
Right.
prongs are missing basically, so the virus can't go into his bloodstream.
Right.
And so they're using, so basically there are people in the world who are partially or fully immune to HIV or to any disease that enters the cells in the same form as a bubonic plague and as a COVID. But I'm not a scientist. COVID is brand new, right?
Yes.
I Googled COVID and this mutation. And so there are people that are like, hey, we should probably look into this.
Right.
Talking about it on science stuff. But again, it's too soon. So I wanted to do a podcast on this because I thought this was amazing that there are people who you could never get HIV. Now they're using this genetic mutation to see if they can kind of cure it. They're trying to see if there's a way they can turn off those prongs from coming out, right?
Right.
So I think that's a good thing. But isn't that amazing that a genetic mutation that is a fucking fluke, right? That is considered imperfect is basically allowing these people not to get infected by certain bacteria and viruses. I find that shit amazing.
It's amazing because it was, I mean, so many amazing things had to happen at the molecular level for this to occur. And as you described, when it's the title of it, the CCR5 Delta 32 mutation, the Delta 32 means it deleted 32 base pairs, okay? Now, when you think of the DNA, the double helix, right? You're looking at two different molecules that are being that are bound together. You have the purines on one side and the pyrimidines, right? And you know, if you know basic biology, you always know that AT binds together. That means adenine and thymine bind together, and GC, guanine and adenine. Cytosine guanine bind together, right? They form base pairs. So for this mutation to actually work, that means that 32 of these pairs had to be deleted. That's why it's called Delta 32. And if that didn't happen in the mutation process of all these people getting sick of the plague or smallpox, whichever the case may be, if that didn't happen perfectly and end up with 32 deleted base pairs, this CCR5 will not work. So it's amazing that nature found a way, you know?
Yeah. And the crazy thing is that obviously you guys know, I said earlier, 75 million to 200 million people died of the Black Plague.
Yeah.
People estimate 100 million plus to have died of AIDS. COVID, we're just now counting, right?
Yeah.
I think today it went over 180,000. And we're just in the first wave, even though sometimes some people are naive and ignorant and think we're in the second wave.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You got a nurse here and a scientist over here, and we're like, yeah, no. Yeah, sorry guys.
Yeah.
The flu season coming up is the second wave.
Yeah.
What I'm getting at is it's crazy that because of the CCR5, which are, it's in the cell, it comes out of the cell, and the virus bacteria attaches to it, and then the CCR5 pulls it in, right?
Right.
Those deleted 32, basically it's not, the CCR5 is either not existent in the cells, or they're just in the cells, but they just can't get out because of it doesn't have the capacity to. And so you have people out there walking who will never get infected by certain things. And so now what they're trying to do, like I said earlier, was they're trying to find a way of how do we turn off CCR5 in the body to cure these diseases.
Right.
I think we may see it in our lifetime.
I think we're very close. People have always asked me, well, how come we can't, or the conspiracy theories, they always say, well, we have the cure for AIDS in a bottle and a pill, but you know what, the conspiracy, this, and they don't allow you to sell it, and they don't want to make money, and it's like, no. HIV is so serious that it's a part of your genome. Your cells keep making, your DNA keeps making your cells keep making new daughter cells with DNA that has the code for HIV. It's a part of you forever, So there's no cure in the sense of, here, take this drug. And in fact, the drugs you take, you can even watch a commercial that says, take this drug for HIV, and it lowers it to such a point that it's not even detected by a lab test, But that's just the Band-Aid. That's just, to lower the levels, But you're never going to get rid of it, because the second you're off that drug, it spikes up and, then it makes you sick again,
Yeah.
So the only way to get this...
there.
So one way to get this out of your body is by gene therapy. And that's something I personally worked in the lab with. Now, I did not work with HIV. I engineered viruses, but I worked on a whole different genetic disease that involves newborn babies. Completely different. But the idea of how to fix the problem, how to fix the genetic mutation, is the same. So I think this is a very exciting time for people who are in science and medicine, because I think we're going to see a viable gene therapy for HIV, very soon. And we know that it could possibly work in theory because, the science behind it, and I'm talking about the science of CRISPR and how you can pinpoint a specific region of a gene, specific letter of the DNA, and change it. So by being able to have that power, that godlike power of doing that, it's going to give us the ability to actually do that, right? And turn off these genes, CCR5, turn it on, turn it off for studying, for research, or for helping patients. But what we don't know is what happens downstream to the DNA, Mm-hmm. Like we changed something, but did anything else get shifted or changed in the genome, That's what we don't know. And that's what takes a long time to study, So we will see treatments very soon, I think. But we don't know what the consequences are if you shift something,
Yeah. So that's where it's a lot more complicated. But I do believe if I make it to 80, we might see it.
I think much sooner, honestly. I think within 10 years, we'll see some really cool stuff.
Yeah. Now, there were people talking about smallpox and the CCR5 Delta 32 mutation. I looked into it, and what I saw was that there was really when they did studies, there was no connection. I don't know if there's anything you might have seen on your end.
No, I did see that people were kind of not happy about the whole Black Plague, bubonic plague. They were kind of like, well, that's just too old. And they thought that maybe smallpox might have been the more viable introduction for this mutation,
Yeah, but this apparently once they did the studies, they didn't see a connection.
Right.
So take that, motherfuckers.
But they, like you stated, like you said, Mary, that it was most common in people of Northern European descent.
Yeah.
So if you can have unprotected sex with anybody, make sure it's a Northern European person.
No, 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 no. No. Not a European person. Make sure they get tested. You can actually get tested for the genetic mutation. So, not only do you want to
I'm kidding, people. I'm kidding.
I know, but still let's be serious here. Let's get STD tested and ask them to put it, just slide in there. Can you check if I have the Delta 32 mutation while you're at it?
Yeah, good luck.
The doctor's like, what?
Fuck you. Get the fuck out.
So I was very intrigued by this subject. I was intrigued. I think I was maybe in my early 20s. I want to say it could have even been 20 years ago when I found out about this genetic mutation. The fact that the bubonic plague, people may have never contracted it or survived it, depending if they had one or two copies, right?
Right.
Had this genetic mutation. And at the time they were realizing, when I watched that documentary, AIDS was in the 80s?
Yes.
So I must have watched this in either 2000 or maybe it was 20 years ago. Yeah. Oh, shit.
What?
2000. That was 20 years ago.
I
was like, damn,
I'm
old.
I got you beat. Shut up.
What I'm getting at is that I found out about this genetic mutation in around 2000.
Well, it was discovered
20 years ago.
Yeah, it was discovered around that time.
No, it was discovered before that.
It wasn't that much longer than 20 years.
It was in the 90s, in the early 90s.
Early 90s.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know why I thought it was the late 90s.
Nope.
Okay.
Early 90s. And that's the whole point that I was saying, is that certain people knew about this, scientists, right, for at least 30 years.
Wow.
But in the world, it's all hypothetical, right?
Yep.
So to get respect in the science world, medical world, it takes a long time. It takes a long time. And so it started with this guy looking at the bubonic plague and why did they survive, right? And he's seeing this genetic mutation. Then someone saying, hey, I have someone who husband died of AIDS.
Right.
And he keeps coming up negative, and then they linked it, checked him, and like, oh, he has the fucking genetic mutation.
Yeah.
And guess what? HIV enters the cells the same way that the plague does.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not a scientist, but I know that much. And so when they talked about how COVID enters the cells the same way, I just thought of this mutation and I was like, interesting.
It's interesting. I'd have to revisit the COVID all over again, but I keep hearing about the ACE2 receptors, so it might be a whole different receptor.
Mm-hmm.
Similar mechanism, though. Could be a very similar method that it's using.
Mm-hmm.
But the receptor might be different. So it might be a different binding site,
Yeah.
that it's coming in through. But yeah, if the behavior is similar, then that could, be interesting to facilitate, treatments for this or a quicker vaccine, which they're working on now. I mean, who knows how effective it's going to be and all that in a few months or, but thinking long term now to just sidestep COVID, because that's a virus that the masses can survive, but things like HIV, you get infected, you're infected for life. Like if you don't have it under control, your body will develop AIDS and shut down and you'll die.
Yeah, but being a nurse, it's not like it was in the 80s.
Right.
Yeah. No, they live normal lives and can live longer than you and I.
Yeah, look at Magic Johnson.
As long as they take the meds. Yeah.
Magic Johnson's got that magical Mexican cure, whatever. The rumor's always been all these years he goes to Mexico for treatments, and I'm like, the dude looks healthy. Like, what I'm saying? He's like, everybody, like in the 90s who were getting sick, were getting awful, all those drugs, AZT and all that were causing all these crazy side effects and horrible, deformations and stuff, and people were dying. And it's like, yeah, Magic Johnson always looked good. So it's always that, it was always some conspiracy about he got the perfect cure and all that. And it's like, no, he just had the money and probably said, sign me up for the experimental. Exactly.
Yeah. The other thing I found out going back to the CCR5 is that it also plays a role in tumor invasion for cancer.
Yes.
So if the scientists are able to figure out a way to turn off the CCR5, remember guys, the CCR5 is those prongs that come out of the cells to grab now here we have cancer, right? We have the plague, HIV, potentially COVID, cancer. If they can turn that shit off on a molecular level, we're on some shit right there. That to me is amazing.
Yeah, and like I said, it's doable because in the research I did, I was able to turn off the gene that caused this disease that these poor kids are suffering from. But we made it work, which is amazing. But the thing is, we don't know the long-term effects because we don't know downstream what's going on with the DNA. So, and there's just so much DNA to look at, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it's like that. That's why, we have the technology to get there and turn these genes on and off now. And there's even labs that are able to turn 60 or 100 genes on and off at one time. They're doing some crazy things with it, So it's amazing because in the near future, maybe within 50 years or 100 years, maybe even less, like they'll look at your genetic profile, right? And they'll be like, well, you're probably going to have Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, cancer, and this and that. And then at an early age, they can probably turn all those off,
Yeah.
But we don't know the long-term effects, the ramifications, what happens when you do that,
Exactly.
So it's exciting time to be doing this kind of work in science and medicine. But yeah, we just don't know. There's a lot of unknown things. So a lot of cool technology that we're able to do, and at the same time, a lot of unknowns.
Yeah. Yeah. So it should be interesting.
Yeah.
I again think this subject is amazing. I mean,
Yes.
I was in nursing school, and I think I mentioned this to Leonie, and I think I might have mentioned this earlier. Please correct. Where I wrote a paper on it in nursing school.
Yeah.
So in the class that I did it, my instructor was actually a neuroscientist, and he was so proud of my paper. We had to do stand in front of the class, right? And everyone did certain, I don't know, they picked diseases, you name it. I was like, hi, my name is Maria Escobar, and I am doing my research paper on the CCR5 Delta 32 genetic mutation. And I did my whole presentation with my little flashcards. I was so excited. Nice. And I could see a little tear coming out of his eyes. And he was smiling the whole time. He was like, oh my God.
Because you know what? Look.
She just made my day. Yeah. And I will never forget it.
But see, that's the thing, though. It's like, there's a lot of people that just go through the motions because they don't want to do that shit. They don't like public speaking.
I do that. I go through the motions. I'm sure you did for certain classes, right? You just go through. I'm just trying to pass.
Yeah. But the thing is, because you put blood, sweat, and tears into that presentation and research, I would be standing there as a ghost leaning on the wall. I would be crying for you too, because it's like, here's somebody who cared, you cared enough to research it, to understand it, and then to give a presentation. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's what makes these professors proud. That's what makes them think it was all worthwhile. Because I got to one student, and I made that one nursing student, I made her really care. And
I gotta correct you there, because I don't want to get that credit, because in the sense of, I don't even think, because we were talking about molecular stuff. He didn't instill that in me. That was from that documentary I saw years ago that I was like, oh, this is my chance to shine and talk about this mutation.
Right.
Because he basically said, pick whatever you want. And so for me, I was like, I'm all, you know me, right? I'm all over the place. My intellectual level is all over the place.
It's great.
I don't know if it's great, but
it is, because you're very intelligent, and I can have all these crazy conversations with you. Yeah. So I think you're very well rounded, but but on top of that, you're very intelligent. So it's one of those things where you know so much about medicine, and then you know so much about science, and then when you don't know, you're not afraid to ask.
No.
And that's I think what makes you great.
And you know what bothers me, and I know we're getting sidetracked here, but where people think you're an intellectual if you're into art, and if any of you guys are listening to me are like art lovers, you know, I'm not trying to offend anyone, but I've met a few people in my lifetime where it's almost like, if you're into art, you know this. I don't give a fuck about art, but I have a fucking memory that's impeccable, and you know, my, you know, IQ level's kind of like up there. Do you know what I mean? So
Right.
I get offended when people say that, because I was like, I don't give a fuck about art, but I'll school you on everything else. You know, like
Right.
Getting sidetracked anyway. But anyway, so yeah, I'm really excited. Looking forward to see what happens with the CCR5 Delta 32 genetic mutation. There are labs that will test for this. So, but you would have to pay privately if you guys want to know.
Right.
Most people are European and, you know, that have it. But having said that, you know, there's a lot of migration everywhere. So there might be people in America that have it. There is very small amount of people that have it in other countries like India, China, you know, in Africa. So it's definitely mostly found in Europe. But if you guys want more information, go out there. It's all on the internet. There are certain things that are not conspiracies, excuse me. I guess scientists are always going to argue, right? So someone might think it's from this, and so scientists are always arguing about it, but what they know is that certain people cannot get infected with certain things. So maybe in our lifetime, right, they will find a way to turn off CCR5. And, you know, I can say, if I knew I had cancer, right, or if I knew there's a potential that I might die, you know what I mean, from a disease, and I would be willing to go and have my CCR5 turned off without knowing the repercussions, just to see if it would help, if it meant helping the world. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you would definitely be a, what they call frontline, you know, what do you call it, clinical trial, you know.
Yeah.
Like, because you're at that, you're basically, you know, giving them authorization and saying that, look, nothing's working. I'm not going to be alive in 6 months or a year because nothing's working. Let's do this and see what
I have to lose.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And you never know. It could definitely turn off the cancer gene and you live a long life, you know?
Yeah. And like we said, we don't know the long-term ramifications of this. But is it worth it for us to, as a human, knowing that there are people in this world who are immune to these diseases,
right,
because their CCR5 is practically defective and won't come up to the surface to bring these viruses in, these bacteria, these tumor cells in.
Right.
Is it worth it? Right? I think it is. I don't know. So I guess we'll see. And I guess that's it. If you guys, I hope you found this episode very intriguing. If you guys knew about this, I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, isn't this awesome? It's fucking awesome, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and also you guys were able to hear me realize that 2000 was fucking 20 years ago. I was like, damn, I'm old.
That's funny.
So, let's do it again, Leonie. What do you say?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Hope you guys can join us on the next episode of Purposely Curious. Bye. That was episode 25 of the Purposely Curious podcast. Make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on most podcast platforms. And follow us on social media at Purposely Curious on Instagram and at Purposely C Pod on Twitter. That's Purposely, the letter C, Pod. Until next time, you know what to do.